courts? And
well, let me speak very broadly. There are 37 states where they elect their justices. Interestingly, most of the original 13 states have been very resistant to that because at the time of the founding of the American Constitution, with the original 13 colonies, they were still of the pattern of appointment for life, just as the federal system is. But in any event, over the years that the Republic was in existence, in the late 1830s when Andrew Jackson became president, he introduced a kind of thinking which was that one of the great ways to eliminate corruption was to make everything be elected, that this would be a cleansing agent. The result was Michigan came into the Union in 1837 and had everything elective. I mean, the road commissioners and on and on and on.
State fair director.
Yeah, if you contrast this with, say, a state like New Jersey, a roughly similar sized state, New Jersey has the governor and the U.S. Senator, and that is it for statewide elections. The governor appoints the Attorney General, the governor appoints the Supreme Court, and so on. So you have these two general theories as to how it is appropriate to govern. Michigan has had an elected judiciary since 1850. We have a very unique system for getting to the election. Since 1908, the two great political parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, have had the duty to nominate at convention candidates for the open seats. The candidates then run nonpartisan, which is always sort of an unusual thing to come from a partisan nomination. That doesn't happen anywhere else. We run nonpartisan, and incumbent justices have what is called an incumbent designation. This is underneath their name, it'll say Justice of the Supreme Court or whatever the post might be. And so as the Michigan system has developed, it has been a very incumbent-friendly system. That is to say, people once on the bench tend to stay on the bench, which, if you understand the role that the judiciary plays, is not a bad thing. Unlike the theory that we all do better when our representatives change every now and again, the sort of the theory of term limits, almost no one contests that courts are not representative, and that as you become more experienced and more sage in the law, you are better, and thus, although this isn't always true, but our more senior judges tend to be our more seasoned our more senior judges tend to be our more seasoned judges also. So we have a real fine judiciary in this state. Our system works in ways that are quirky and unusual, but I think if you once gain an appreciation of it, it really has produced a wonderful judiciary for this state. I'm very proud to be the chief for the roughly 600 judges in this state. We have, for the size of our state and the size of our judiciary, very, very few disciplinary problems, very few problems with judges who go bad. We're proud of that. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the nature of the likelihood of being able to keep your job as a judge makes a higher quality person be interested in it.
How long is a term for?
All judges in Michigan have 6-year terms except the Supreme Court that has an 8-year term.
And if there's a vacancy, then the governor has the ability to fill that.
Yeah, we have an interesting system here. The governor gets to fill a vacancy, and it does not have to be approved by the Senate, but it does have to be approved by the people at the next general election. So as in my case, when I was appointed in 97, I had to run in 98. This has worked pretty well. I mean, I think most governors take this responsibility very, very seriously. I know Governor Engler did, was a person I was very well acquainted with, and he really worked hard at making his judicial appointments, and I really do think he did quite a good job at it. He really appointed some very fine people.
Now, as the Chief Justice, you take cases that come before the court, but do you have other responsibilities as far as administering the courts throughout Michigan?
I do. It's easy to get a little too grand about it, but I'm the guy who decides what we're having for lunch, basically, you know. But I mean, I have very, very capable and strong-willed colleagues. It is not as though I'm the dominant force on this court. I'm just one of the boys, and we have very, very fine justices. It's a wonderful court to serve on because the intellectual capabilities of the court are very high. And we were talking earlier about why this court is so highly regarded around the country. I think this is one of the things also. Our decisions are pretty well done and thus gain a lot of attention from other courts who are having similar kinds of legal issues.
Do you have jurisdiction over how lower courts operate? Or you mentioned,
Total.
you know, that Michigan in general, we have a good reputation for having a good judiciary and good judges. There's not too many disciplinary, issues. Is that something that would come before you?
All of it does. We are the ultimate hero, or I mean, we're the ultimate deciders. I guess that's a George Bush word, but the ultimate deciders on all cases of judicial discipline. We establish all the rules for the courts in the state. Sometimes courts will have local rules, but we have to approve them. So it's a system that we have the responsibility to make sure it runs correctly.
And what about the way juries operate? And I'm asking this because I have constituents call from time to time, and they may have complaints about the jury system, usually because they've been asked to serve and they set time aside and this or that happened and they weren't happy about things. I've had a constituent who served on a jury and then it seemed just a few months later got called again, and was wondering, gosh, I just did it, isn't there? So I want to relay to you, from my constituents, they have questions about the way juries operate. Does the Supreme Court set those?
We set the broad templates of what they're to aim for, but the way in which the jury system operates in a given county is very locally controlled. Great efforts are undertaken in almost all of our counties to not disproportionately burden some citizens with jury service. And so the kinds of issues that you were mentioning are generally things that our local courts are very, very sensitive to. Running a jury system like finding 12 or 13 jurors for a criminal case, if you think about it, is quite an undertaking. I mean, we pay them virtually nothing, and we ask them to perform this very, very civically important function. Now, fortunately, most Americans are very willing to do that and understand the importance of it, but that doesn't take away from the fact that we're asking them to make quite a sacrifice. We're one of the few really viable jury systems remaining in the world. I mean, we got the juries from England. They still have, I think, some juries in England, but by and large, they've gotten rid of them. America still has pretty wide and broad use of judges in both civil and criminal cases. As I mentioned earlier, I was a lawyer for many years, tried a lot of cases. I really became quite enamored of juries. Very complicated civil cases that I would try about product liability and such. Real temptation to say, oh, they'll never understand this. They did understand it. Jurors were really smart. And part of that is because we have a pretty smart population, number one, but number two, they take it real seriously. They pitch right in and want to produce the truth. And that is, of course, the ultimate goal of any judicial system, is to get to the truth and then let the truth dictate where the chips will fall. But we have remained with the jury. We're, as I say, fairly unique in the world in that regard.
Are there any nuances in our state constitution that affect the operation of your court, say, versus in other states? I mean, you mentioned how you mentioned 1908 and you mentioned 1850, and I'm guessing that those are when our Constitution changed. We're on our fourth one. Are there any? And of course, so this is you have to be an expert on our Constitution as the Chief Justice. I'm sure you must have to.
We have a lot of cases